You know, hey, look, it's Barris. Bye, you remember her from a while ago? She's apparently Ahsoka's friend. Like, we haven't seen her a lot. It's good to see her. I'm sorry, it's almost impossible for me to talk about the first part of this episode without kind of spoiling, so I'm going to do my best here. I like a lot of her lines. Nothing will ever change. And of course, we see that this is now a military matter, which I actually kind of hinted at last episode, with the fact that the Senate wanted oversight over Jedi matters because, well, the Jedi are more and more just becoming another step of the government, as I've been talking about several times now. One of the things I like, though, is after the confrontation, you'll notice Barriss actually reaches out to Ahsoka. Did you catch that? She says, maybe representing emotions is wrong. And then, of course, when Ahsoka comforts her by saying, I will make her pay, Barriss just kind of deflects and says, well, you shouldn't keep your master waiting. And then she looks really downcast afterwards. In fact, if you're paying attention, and I do urge you to do this if you've watched this show before, rewatch at least just the beginning part of this episode and watch her face, Barriss's face. It tells everything. It's a great job on behalf of the animators. And of course, the fact that she's lamenting the loss of a friend helps to explain it for first-time viewers or people who probably aren't even paying attention because all the attention is on Tarkin and how he's like trying to take control. I mean, that's Tarkin, right? Funny how imperial the place looks. Like the entire prison facility. It basically looks copy-paste almost, not quite, from the actual detention facilities over on the Death Star in A New Hope. And of course, then we get a nice long shot of it when, Ahsoka is framed for everything, and we've got the acclimators up there, and we've got the juggernauts going on. It's always nice to see the juggernauts. It's one of the only ground vehicles I really liked in this series. And, da, da, da. And then, of course, Ahsoka Tano gets framed. And we do know it's a framing. We see enough to know that Ahsoka did not kill Letta. It's interesting they let us in on that little bit of information because they could have just shown us the hologram and showed her going and seeing her risen up into the air and choked. I gotta admit, though, it's actually a damn shame that the biggest thing, the biggest piece of evidence they have is the absence of any other evidence and the fact that she went like this when she was choking, when Letta was being choked. But there is a very good question. Tarkin says, if there was somebody else, why didn't you sense them? Keep that in mind for later. Anyways, so this whole episode is an excellent purview. I mean, most of the episode is taken up by the escape, but all of that escape is really a character dynamic. Obviously, it's very cool, but what's most interesting to me is both sides go out of their way to try and limit what they can do in order to not hurt the other. In fact, when they finally decide to start using a weapon that could actually be lethal, that's when they manage to slip up Tano. And Tano herself finally escapes by doing something that's frankly insane. Funny note, Anakin could have followed her into that pit. But I love the Darth Vader music as Anakin is demanding to see his Padawan. And they actually approach him with weapons drawn, like, okay. And I just picture what's going through this guard's heads, like, oh God, please don't make me fight Anakin Skywalker. Please don't make me fight Anakin Skywalker. God, please, just... Okay, he walked away. He walked away, oh thank God. I have a note here. I didn't know you could deflect stun blasts with lightsabers. Then again, we found out also in the prequel era that you can deflect force lightning with lightsabers, so I guess we just have all sorts of things we can deflect with lightsabers. It is so funny how hard Ahsoka tries to not hurt or kill anybody. You'd think that would have been a sign. Like really, right? Ahsoka goes out of her way to sneak and avoid her way out rather than just massacring her way out, which arguably probably would have been a lot smoother and simpler way to do it. We'll talk more about that in the future, maybe. I don't know. Anakin is in an interesting position this entire time. Because, well, I'm just going to go ahead and say this outright. I've always believed that Anakin Skywalker was doomed from the beginning. He had the entirety of the deck stacked against him from word go. But I think this incident with Ahsoka is actually what pushed him the final bit. I mean, yeah, obviously Episode 3 happened and a lot of stuff happened there. But in my opinion, this is basically the conclusion of Anakin Skywalker's character arc throughout the course of the Clone Wars. That he has officially reached the point where he recognizes the base problem. What do you do when the system's wrong? What do you do when the system is broken? He himself is struggling at this whole thing. As he says, I believe you. I trust you. And she trusts him. They are effectively on the same side. And he's like, okay, we need to bring you in to have this looked at so we can figure out what the hell's actually going on. I'll bring it to the council. And yet she, of course, points out the obvious. No one's going to believe her except for him. And maybe Obi-Wan. So what possible use would that be? To actually go ahead and try to bring this to the council? They'd just be like, killed her, you did. Yes. Murderer, you are. And, what, you think I'm kidding? That's the whole point, though. In my opinion, this is the real actual point at which the wedge begins between Anakin and the rest of the Jedi, with the only possible exception of Obi-Wan, and of course Ahsoka herself. Because, well, she's right. What do you do when the system is broken? And you could just see it tearing Anakin up the whole time. He's like, I gotta bring her back, because it's the only way we'll be able to prove her innocence. And yet, as this entire episode shows, trying to follow the system's rules demonstrably does not work. Now, that's important to keep in mind. I can't talk about it today, but we'll be talking about it tomorrow or whenever, because that is the entire impetus for where this story is going to go. That Anakin Skywalker has recognized the fundamental truth in this circumstance, that the system does not work, and he has to break it. As you can tell, I really enjoy this. I wish I had more to talk about. Like, I had so much to talk about on the Mandalorian thing. I mean, I could mention some of the specific things, like how awesome it was seeing Ahsoka whirlwinding through the rain, and the choir music, and her leaping to her faith, and blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, though, this is one of those episodes that had me not only engaged, but interested. And also, this was the episode where I realized I liked Ahsoka as a character. Now, I know that sounds stupid, considering I've liked her as a character for quite some time. But this is when it really struck me. I want to tell you a brief story, okay? Bear with me. I know you hate it when I talk so long. In Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess, they begin by introducing a character, Midna or Midna, depending on your preference. And she's like, hi. Although, actually, I guess they have voice acted now, so I have to say Midna. Anyways, Midna is introduced, and she's a brat. And I'm like, ugh. And I didn't like her. Fast forward quite a bit, there's a certain part of the game where she is injured, and I'm just like, oh god, I've got to do everything I can to save her. And that was my emotion in that time. Now, that's my point. I never really noticed any perceptive change in my opinion. It's not like she just suddenly became a better character. It was more like it was a smooth and gradual arc that was so subtle I didn't even notice the change in my own opinion on her. It's the same thing with Ahsoka for me. Over the course of the Clone Wars, I grew to care about this character, this person, more and more and more, and it wasn't until something big threatened her that it really clicked with me how much I had become invested in her. And that was this episode, when she was framed for these things, and is now facing a broken system that is increasingly becoming under military control as the Empire is starting to slowly solidify its existence from within the shell of the Republic, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, my God, is she going to get out of this? Because remember, as I've pointed out several times before, one of the strengths of the Clone Wars is that any new characters, the stakes can be real, because they're not in the prequels. They're not in the original trilogy. Ahsoka could have died, or worse. So, yeah, we'll see where this one goes next time.